I'm Deana.
And I'm Suzanne, and thank you so much for tuning in to the Rise and Shine It's Hypno Time Podcast.
With Deana and Suzanne.
That's us.
The purpose of this podcast is to help you along your healing journey, to become the very best version of you that you can be, and to create the life of your dreams. We want to give you the tools you need to succeed through personal stories, guided meditations, hypnosis, NLP, and self-hypnosis techniques, as well as interviews with experts in a variety of healing modalities, from energy workers and spiritual healers to chiropractors, acupuncturists, holistic medicine, and much, much more.
Yes, and we also want this podcast to be a place where people can come together, share stories, and be reminded that you're not alone. In fact, the healing journey is a lifelong journey, and we are just so thankful that you're choosing us to be a part of your journey and that we have you to be a part of ours as well. And with that being said, let's start the show.
I'm ready when you are.
Hi, everyone. We are so excited because today we have Michele Rosenthal on the show. She's a trauma recovery specialist and just an amazing person. And we just want to, first of all, say thank you so much for being here. It's an honor.
Thank you so much. I'm so looking forward to just really dishing together because we have such a like-minded approach to so many things. So I'm looking forward to really getting deep into something meaningful
there
today.
You go.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to eating your dishing.
Nice.
Oh. I like to cook.
Well, let's first of all start. Could you maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself and what modalities you decided to get certified in?
Absolutely. And actually, let's just start, spicing things up because I'll actually tell you why I chose those modalities outside of the conventional norm, which, when I did it, everyone was saying to me, why would you do hypnosis? Why would you do NLP? What do you, life coaching? What's that? Why don't you just go back and get a psychology master's? And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. That's the last thing I want to do. So I am a trauma survivor. I had a horrific trauma when I was 13, and that really changed not only who I was, but who I became. And I ended up with post-traumatic stress disorder that went undiagnosed for 24 years, because while I had classic symptoms at the time of my trauma and at the time that my symptoms began, it was 1981. Post-traumatic stress disorder was only 1 year old as a clinical diagnosis. Wow. And nobody was applying it to civilian kids. It was really being applied to Vietnam veterans.
Right.
So when I started exhibiting symptoms, everyone thought I was a difficult teenager. And then I'm a writer. I'm an artist. I'm a playwright, a poet, an author, a director. So when I outgrew the difficult teen label, I became a temperamental artist. So there was always a way to explain away my behavior instead of somebody appropriately saying to me, holy cow, that was a really major trauma and here's what you could be expecting. And if these symptoms persist for more than 30 days, you really need to get help because this is manageable, this is healable. But back then, and from 1981 to 2000, nobody, probably really even 2010, nobody was really talking about how healable PTSD actually is or what it is. So
that's because most of the areas that they work with PTSD is like vets and things like that. And they didn't have the tools either. They used a lot of talk therapy or medication too. So
that's right.
They didn't have answers. You're right.
That's right. And oddly enough, ironically, the larger PTSD population is civilian, just simply because of the numbers of how population works.
Right.
And so, a lot of good has come in the past decade. But for me, it meant that I really thought I was crazy. And I, just started telling myself, well, some people are meant to be crazy. The best creative artists are crazy. So I'm just going to lean into the genius of this crazy. and I learned to live that way. But all along, there's this little voice saying, I don't think you're crazy. I think there's just something really wrong with you. But I didn't have a name for it.
And even that wouldn't be the appropriate definition, there's not something wrong with you. There's something that's happened to you, and you haven't learned about it yet, right? You need to find a way to manage it or heal from it, right?
Well, that's very true. And I know that now.
Yeah.
But back then,
Yeah.
I didn't understand that I was a trauma survivor.
Right.
I never correlated what happened to me with who I became and why I was struggling. Because what happened to me was the thing I was trying to outrun. It was the thing I was trying to forget. It was a thing.
Right. So you wasn't connecting to it or relating to it.
At all. And I was dissociated a lot of time.
Right.
So I really wasn't even connecting to myself. So you asked me, what am I trained in? After a decade of trying to get help because I knew there really was something wrong, but I didn't know what to do with it. And I banged around. My parents dragged me to all kinds of psychiatrists and psychologists and specialists in the conventional field that did nothing for me. And then I started this whole holistic journey. And I finally found my way to freedom through a hypnotist who also used NLP and life coaching. So it was only natural. Once I came out of the dark and into the light, I never planned to get certified in anything. I just wanted to get on with my life. It was incredible to suddenly see the world in color instead of black and white, and to feel joy instead of terror. So I didn't plan to be doing this work. But about a year after my recovery, that whole year, when you're done with your symptoms, you're not done with your healing.
Right.
But nobody told me that. My hypnotist just said, okay, you have no symptoms. You don't want to come back. You're done. And I really floundered for that year. I was so lost and really despondent that I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how to live the person I had become. I had no job. I had no friends. I had no family. I had no spouse. I mean, I had nothing that a 40-year-old person should have. And I was essentially starting over. And I was working for family because that was like all I could do at that time.
Right.
And so one day when I was lamenting to my brother, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to live like a normal life because I haven't ever had one since I was a kid. And he said to me, well, why don't you just start writing about what you're experiencing, because you're a writer. So why don't you write about it? You guys are looking at each other. What are you thinking?
No, I just think that's a great way. I mean, that was just a brilliant piece of advice and a great way to
let stuff out. Get it on paper and be able to look at it.
And utilize the stuff that you're good at to be able to help you down the healing journey. I think that's really special.
And we looked at each other too, because we can relate to so much in different areas of what you're saying, not specific, but to different areas. We writing and doing NLP and hypnosis, that's what we do too. So we're just relating.
Yeah. And writing is so cathartic to me too. Like I recommend that to everyone.
What do you do? Do you journal?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you mean, on a daily basis?
Yeah, pretty much.
She's also a journalist. I mean, she that's what she got her degree. That's what she got her degree in. And so when she came on board here at my center, her writing and being able to, quickly put things out in words and come up with, different scripts or ideas. She's just good at that. So for her, I think that's even something that I knew she could relate to it even more.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, something about like writing and being in that flow state and just, it's like these messages come through you, and sometimes it's for the clients and sometimes it's for me, it's really healing. Yeah. And
then for me with the NLP, because I just became a trainer in NLP through Dr. Will. I think Will Horton.
Yeah.
And just looking at the questions that bring out deeper information, just little questions like specifically. So what do you, specifically?
It makes you pull for more.
Yeah. And when you dig, it's just so interesting to see, people come up with stuff that they're shocked to find.
Mm-hmm. It was all within you all along,
It's so true. I was working with a client last week. She's she's a leader of a very large community. And she was saying to me what she wanted to work on is that she just doesn't trust her brain. She just doesn't trust it to retrieve information, to process information. And she has a diagnosed I wouldn't even call it a disorder. She has a diagnosis, but it's nothing that would interfere with you being wildly successful. And she has been. And despite all of that success, she came to me to say, I need to like clean up whatever trauma is in my history, that I just don't trust my brain. And to me, and, you know, we don't put our bias into our sessions, but to me, it's like she's living her label.
Right.
When I got my PTSD diagnosis, it set me free. It was like, oh, thank God, the problem's not me.
Right. It's coming from somewhere else.
But it's sort of like she's taken her label and she's waving it as a flag. Before you even get to know her, you know her label. And she's built an entire business on that, which is great, but it's tripping her up now.
Right. It's keeping her stuck.
Yeah. Exactly. And so when we went through that whole wonderful NLP process of really getting, you know, through the different, you know, down to the deep structure and through the whole process of well-formedness and all of that, we started with, she wanted to better be able to trust her brain and depend on her brain. And what was really underneath that was she needed to be more herself all the time. Because the moments she didn't trust her brain were the moments she wasn't being herself.
Her authentic self. Yeah.
Exactly. And that was all it took. That and we did this in one session. It was one and done. It was like we went through this whole conscious conversation with NLP processes. And then I used hypnosis to lock it in. And that was it, you know?
Isn't that still good?
Don't you love that?
Yeah.
It's that easy. When you're working with a client who's really ready to change and you match your skills with their desire.
Their needs, yeah.
Yeah, it's fulfilling.
So,
but I would like to go back a little bit because I believe you were about to tell us about how you started writing after. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Because this is the end of the story. My brother's 3 years younger, and he's a technophile, and I'm a technophobe. So we balance each other out. So it was like 2007, 2008, and he said to me, "You need to write about this," which is great because when we write, just to add on to what you were saying, we dissociate from what we're struggling with, right? Which is a really powerful process.
Right.
Like you were saying, you
Distance
see it
yourself.
on the page, you're getting it out of you, it's separate. And so you're able to, I love that part of the meaning of what it is to really write. So he said to me, you know, you've always been a writer. So I was a published playwright by then. I was a published poet. I had a career as a writer. So he said to me, you've always been a writer. Why are you not writing about this stuff? You need to write about this. And he said, but not on paper. He said, forget about pen and paper. He said, there's this new thing now. It's called a blog. It gives you a sense of how long ago this was. It's called a blog. He said, you should blog about this. And I thought he was crazy, like blog about it on the internet. Like, who's even going to read it? Who's going to care? Nobody's going to understand what I'm talking about. And I hemmed and hawed. And he just looked at me. He said, I'm setting you up with a Blogspot login. Just type. So I did. For 3 weeks, I just typed everything that I was thinking. And at the third week, veterans started reaching out to me by email and by comments on the blog saying, how do you know how I feel? Because I was writing about PTSD and PTSD recovery and PTSD symptoms and what it felt like. And I wrote back to them, I have no idea. I don't know how you feel. I'm just telling you how I feel. And they were saying, but you're a civilian. I'm saying, but you're military. How can you possibly feel how I do? And then rape survivors started writing to me, domestic violence survivors, child abuse survivors. And the next thing you knew, the blog went viral. This huge community was there. And we all realized we were exactly the same. Like we all had different traumas.
Right.
But the experience of trauma and the aftermath was completely universal. And because that community grew so big and so fast and kept asking me for more, I went from Blogspot in this tiny little like space that I didn't think anyone would pay attention. I created a website for PTSD information for lay people, because at that time it was only conventional professional websites talking about it. And then from there, my community expanded and grew. And people started asking me to help them. And at that point, I thought, okay, I really need to get trained, because I can write whatever I want to write, but to actually be helping people, I need to get trained. And that was the moment when everyone said to me, you need to go back for your psychology degree. And I said, oh no, I'm going to get trained as a hypnotist, as a neurolinguistic programmer, and as a life coach. And I did all of those certifications in these long extended programs in 1 year.
Wow.
And I loved it. I loved it. So it set me up to help people in the modalities that had given me the most help. So I was really congruent with, I know these things work because I have lived it from the inside. And so that's how I chose.
So the blog actually set you up, to make the connection. So people knew that you could relate and you could connect to them. So that therefore you wanted to come up with, some solutions, some tools, some opportunities, and you experienced hypnosis, NLP, and life coaching. It helped you. So then you went into it. That's how you got there.
It's funny how things work out like that.
It is, isn't it? So unintentional. And yet we're guided somehow, right? Someone says the right thing at the right time. You take an action in the right place, and everything, if you're willing to follow the path.
You're paying attention. Yeah. That's why I always tell everybody, you need to pay attention to what you're drawn to, even what presents itself in front of you and how it feels to you. If it feels warm or exciting or like I said, resonates, then you run towards it. And if it doesn't, if it's scary or questionable, or, you have discomfort, then that's the message that's probably not right for you. Yeah.
Very true. That's such great advice. And it's so simple, right?
It's so simple.
I live by 2 rules now. I've just taken it all down to 2 rules. Number 1 is follow the good energy, which is what you're saying. Number 2 is it has to be fun. If it's not fun, I don't do it.
Right.
I love that.
That doesn't mean going to the dentist is always fun, and I still do that. But you can make it fun. Right. I have a great relationship with everyone in that office, because I go in with high energy and an intention for all of us to have a good time.
Connection. Being relatable. Exactly. Yeah. You can warm up a room. It's so interesting how you can influence anybody that you're associated with to be positive or negative. And it's all in how you present your energy, how you carry yourself. You can soften the room, or, or
what you choose to focus on.
Right. Yeah. Or you can excite the room by how you, by how you respond.
That's so true.
Well, I will say too that I find your story so inspiring, and thank you for sharing that with us. And I love how you just turn the worst thing into something that helps so many people. So we're just really grateful for you and your work. So thank you.
Thank you.
In your blog, did you share did you go into the details of the trauma, or were you just expressing the experience and how it made you feel and the struggles?
Oh, that's a good question. I deliberately, I tell my story all the time. I've written 3 books. I speak across the country and internationally. I tell my story all the time. But when I started, my trauma was very horrific, very graphic. And so I always don't lead with those details, because I don't want to trigger anybody. Right. And because, I find, people will ask if they want to know. Right.
And that's why I asked you that. I didn't know if you wanted to share any of the details of, what pulled you in, or just leave it as, PTSD, and understand that a lot of us experience that.
I'm happy to share whatever you think is relevant.
And that's completely.
My first book is a memoir, if that tells you anything.
I gotcha.
All the details.
Well, what's the name of your book?
Before the World Intruded: Conquering the Past and Creating the Future. And it is a memoir of trauma, survival, healing, and recovery. And so I'm a medical trauma survivor. So just the bottom line, and I'll leave the rest to everyone's imagination. I had a run-of-the-mill infection. Doctor made a mistake, did not read my chart, prescribed a medication that none of us knew was it was they hadn't told my family. I was just a kid, so they hadn't told my parents that they thought that this particular brand of antibiotics would not be good for me. And so, but they had indicated it on my chart. So the doctor just was busy that day. He was covering for my pediatrician, and he just missed the note. And so prescribed something that we didn't know was going to essentially, I had an allergic reaction to the antibiotic, and it turned me into a full body burn victim within a matter of days. And I spent the next several weeks in a quarantine burn unit room in a hospital in New York City, while all the doctors stood around wondering what to do, because nobody had ever seen what I had. Nobody knew what it was. It took them a week just to diagnose what was happening. And then several weeks, there was no protocol. Today, immediately now they put these patients into a medically induced coma, and they don't.
So you don't have to suffer so you don't have to suffer everything like that.
Exactly.
So you just were left to suffer it raw while they were trying to figure it out
as a child.
Exactly. Head to toe, inside and out, all of my skin burning off. So it was.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, I think we all experience what we do for a reason. You don't always know what it is. I don't know if I chose the right reason, but I know when I walked out of the hospital when I was 13, I remember thinking to myself, well, part of my PTSD is I didn't believe I deserved to survive, but that's another story. Right. But I walked out thinking, since you didn't deserve to survive, you better do something really worthwhile with the fact that you are alive. But then, 24 years of undiagnosed PTSD and then another few years of healing. It was almost 30 years before I could make good on that promise that I had made. Yes, I will do something worthwhile. So,
I'm sure throughout the whole thing, though, you contributed a lot of things to life, even though you may not have made good specifically, to the promise to yourself. Everything that you did in your recovery and everything you did in bringing it, to light, and everything that you did contributed something. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. And thank you. Because we're all learning in every minute, right?
Right.
And so we don't necessarily know which is the minute to what we are here for, or, turn something into something else. But like I think you said earlier, you just have to be present. You have to listen, and then you have to take action.
Inspired action.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
The best survivor's guilt is that something that you deal with a lot with your clients?
I wouldn't say too often. I find in the beginning of my career, I worked a lot with military, and I found that a lot in that community, more the civilian community, that was related to, I had a near-death experience during my weeks in the hospital, and I was so glad I was dying, so glad that I stopped fighting to live, and I let myself go. And my, the only reason I'm here is my mother demanded that I come back. So I really judge myself. It's funny what we do after trauma. We judge ourselves so harshly for what we did during the trauma. I'm working with a rape survivor right now, and she's just so focused on that she allowed that to happen.
She could have done differently or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. We're so self-critical. And as we unwind that self-critical moment, and these are things that you all know, but the general population doesn't always understand, when your amygdala gets really ramped up and your executive functioning goes offline and your hippocampus isn't correctly annotating everything and then marking it and placing it in the right place for recovery. When all of that stuff doesn't happen properly, you don't take the actions that you would have taken if you were having a regular day.
Right.
And yet we judge ourselves in those moments without all of the knowledge. So that's what I think is so powerful about NLP and hypnosis. And the life coaching component is that we can put all of that back in, and it really changes how that memory is coded.
There's a couple of different techniques on how to get somebody to look at themselves differently. And I use a particular one, but I was wondering, is there a technique that you use that allows people to look at themselves, as their very own best friend, as somebody that they love? What kind of things would they say, knowing all of the things you've experienced to you with love and compassion as like a very best friend, or as your child, you know, a mother to a child or whatever?
Right. Sometimes I use parts for that, you know, in the hypnotic realm. But a lot of times I find that life coaching with NLP techniques, or the NLP language patterns, and the NLP approach to meta model and deep structure and all that, to me, really gets the job done. A lot of times, and this is probably my own predisposition, but I just don't like inner child work. Right. It's just so that the language around it, right, I think has a lot of negativity connected to it. So I don't use that model, but I do like IFS sometimes for that work, but only in the lightest way of just describing and explaining to people you have different selves, and, you know, let's map them out so that you can understand what's really going on here, because what you're talking about isn't all of you. It's this aspect. It's a part of you.
Right. Yeah. I would just want to go back for just a minute, because you said you had a near-death experience. And when you know, kind of left your body, when you gave in and kind of released, I'm sure that you felt a release from all of the worldly pressures and pain and everything. That's one of the things that are described oftentimes with near death. You still have a full consciousness. You still have your personality. You still have who you are, seeing through eyes of spiritual eyes, even if they're seeing, you know, watching what's happening. But did you feel a sense of peace and release when you?
Oh, it was amazing.
For that moment?
It was amazing. There was a tunnel. And what I remember most was leaving my body. No, what I remember most was the understanding that I felt my body shutting down. I felt all the energy draining out, and really vividly through my fingers and my toes. Wow. And that was weird for me as a kid. I wasn't aware of my body or energy or anything like that. And it was almost like there was this wisdom that all of a sudden I understood. I have a choice. I don't have to survive. I don't have to keep fighting. I mean, this was, you know, weeks into this illness, and I was tapped out. I was emaciated. I mean, I was like, you think it was bad. And so I remember this overwhelming peace. Holy cow, I feel all the energy leaving. I could just let it go. I don't have to struggle anymore. I get to choose. And that was a powerful thing to realize. I get to choose.
Isn't that neat?
To go. Yeah. And so I chose. I was like, okay, let's go. And so when I didn't stay in my body. When I got into the tunnel, oh my God, it was incredible. It was like for the first time in my life, I knew who I was.
Wow. I've heard that description. Like there's love doesn't encompass it, but there's a sense of I'm home and I'm where I belong, and this is perfectly okay.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people.
I'm getting chills just remembering it right now.
I have chills too.
Because but it was all of that. And it was also the sense I wasn't alone. It was the sense that there were lots of souls there, lots of energies there. It was individual energies, but this is so weird because it was like in a circle. It was dark. It was dark, but the energy was white. And it was like all these strands of white energy, but the sensation of all of it being held in a centrifugal force kind of thing. I don't know. It sounds odd, but such peace, such love, such connection, such aliveness. In the understanding of, oh my God, this is me. I'm energy.
Okay, yeah.
I'm energy. Yeah, I'm okay because I am not that body. Right. That was the thing that I really understood so well. I'm not the body. I'm this energy, and I am enormous. This energy is huge. And one of the hardest parts was coming back in. Like, how do you take the knowledge of all this energy and squish it in?
And know what you're going to face too, because you're coming back into the pain and the
true.
Yeah,
very true.
That would be a really hard choice, I think, for somebody too. One of the commonalities that because I've done a little bit of, people who came back, passed away and came back.
Yeah.
And one of the commonalities in a large percentage, like 98%, was they weren't afraid to die because they knew that this wasn't going to be a bad thing. It's not like everything ends. It's just like this particular
transition.
state. Yeah. This, physical state goes into something, but it's also kind of like you said, this encompassing, warm, safe, alive. It's not like everything shuts down. You know everything. You know everything that you need to know, but you can't describe it with our language. Yeah.
That's so true. It's
Like your
such a
home.
big feeling. Yeah. Like, oh, this is where I belong. And then I have to go back to the world. Like, why would I do that? Why would I do that? And it's really hard to learn to live.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, which is a nice thing though, for people to understand this, because that way it can take them out of the state of being afraid of death, because everybody dies. We're not going to stay on this earth. And if they understand this is temporary and that it's okay and that there's something more, then it makes it easier to be brave with your decisions and go after life to the fullest, because you need to get what you're supposed to get here so you can take it with you.
Yeah, exactly. So you're, depending on what you believe, so your soul can achieve its mission and move on to the next level. I know I had a family member recently who needed emergency open heart surgery. And the night before the surgery was just very concerned, like anybody would be, like, this, I might not make it through this. And I said, well, don't worry, I'll see you on the other side. This is not all there is. And this family member is so not like, this family member is very linear, very logical, hard
to relate.
And so, I was trying to describe it, but it's a leap for some people. But the fact is, I think the scariest thing about death is the suffering, because actual death is freedom. Right.
It's peace. It's just a whole different, it's a release.
Yes.
From all this.
And you said it was your mom that brought you back? Like you heard her voice or something?
She was there, and both my parents were there. My parents were on either side of the bed. I was in this huge burn patient bed, and I couldn't be touched. So everybody was there in caps, gowns, masks. It's like all I could see were eyes. And it occurred to me as I was halfway into the tunnel, I suddenly remembered my parents were there and I was not planning on coming back. So I loved them, and they were suffering right beside me every step of the way. They had moved into the hospital with me. My brother had been sent to live with friends. I mean, like, they were there 24/7. And so it occurred to me, it was just really wrong to leave without telling them goodbye. So I sort of paused. I don't know. I can't really describe what I did or how I did it, but it was sort of like
a hesitation.
I could say that again.
Like a hesitation. You hesitate.
Yeah. I paused my energy enough to just be able to whisper to them 3 lines. I love you. Thank you. I'm dying. And that was it. And then I let myself go. But that was like all my mother needed to hear. She's this 5'1" and a half. She's real big on the half because she's short and doesn't like it. So she's 5'1" and a half, Southern girl who has not slept in weeks, right? So her Southern accent was there, and she put her face really close to mine, and she was on this side, and she said to me, "You are not going to die. You are coming back, and you're coming back now." And I said to her, I can't do it. And this is what brought me back. She said to me 2 things. Number 1, she said, nobody dying can scream as much as you've been screaming up until this moment. And as morbid as a comment that is, I thought it was hilarious, because I've been screaming for weeks. I was in such excruciating pain that I was always screaming. So like that meant anything to her, I thought was hilarious. And that just, I don't know, like something inside of me started to laugh. And then the next thing she said to me, and so that was life affirming, that was life affirming. And the next thing she said to me is what really brought me, it paired with that life affirming aspect, I suppose. And she said to me, you go down deeper inside yourself than you've ever been. And you find the strength to come back here and see this through.
Wow.
Well,
thanks a lot, Michele.
Oh,
if you're 13 and you are very close to your mother and she tells you to do something,
you do it.
You freaking do it. And so I did. I went down inside myself, and think about it from like a 13-year-old Milton model perspective. I went down deeper inside myself than I'd ever been before.
Wow.
And I found the strength.
What it took,
to see it through. And of course she kept talking. It's not like she left me alone, right? She didn't wait to see what happened. She kept talking. And so
we're so glad that you came back just so that you could share all of this information and help so many others, because right now that's exactly what this world needs. They need a lot of help with different tools and different modalities and different ways to get aha moments, to release and to move forward with a different perspective and a different life sense. Yeah,
that's very true. And I think in our work, whatever modality somebody chooses, because there are so many different ways to heal trauma. I mean, we've talked about life coaching, NLP, and hypnosis, but I mean, before I did any of those things, I did all of the alphabet. I did EMDR, EFT, TFT, TAT. I mean, you name it, I tried it. And I do not feel resonance with a lot of the other modalities, but I do think that everything we do is like money in your healing bank account. You may not know that
little steps
was useful. But I do think that at the end, we all have within ourselves a reservoir of resources that, because we feel so depleted and less than, we have disconnected from. And part of the process in our work as practitioners, of course, is to reconnect people with those resources. But I don't like doing that in a way that's like, oh, well, just, what are you good at? Or like, find a resource and remember it. I don't think that's deep enough. I think you really do need to do what my mother said, which is go down inside yourself and you find the resource you need, not the resource I think you need, not the surface level structure of what you think you need, but that deep structure
that's within you.
Yeah, that's really in you and you have not connected to yet. And let's connect to it now.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that we do is we facilitate and we guide or instruct or, help you, give you tools to dig deeper and to find what's within you and to hold that self-value and self-worth, because that's the basis of any recovery is self-value and self-worth and self-love and self-confidence and self-respect and all of itself. And it's never meant to be selfish. It's always meant to become everything that you can be so that you can be everything for everybody else as well as yourself,
That's very true. And I think a lot of times, because words like self-worth, self-esteem, self-confidence, we in our culture, in our lexicon, those become they're sort of tag words, And I think the beauty of the work that we can do on either side as a client or the practitioner is to go beyond the language and into, and this is something that you referenced earlier, the feeling that you're carrying that's preventing you from being where you want to go, or what's the feeling that you don't have that would really help you get where you want to go? Because sometimes I find it really useful to get rid of the language and just get into the deep kinesthetics, because your body, there are all those books, The Body Bears the Burden, The Body Keeps the Score, The Body Remembers. Those titles are out there for a reason, because the body does know. And the body, we all know everything below your neck is your unconscious mind. Everything above your neck is your conscious mind, in a matter of speaking, for the model itself. But I love that idea, because the body really often does know more than the mind, but it's the mind that directs
the body,
everything we do. It's crazy. So it's sort of reversing that in the healing process so that you heal up instead of down.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting.
That is interesting. A lot of times I tell people when they want to know more about it, I said it's like healing from the inside instead of having somebody yak on the outside telling you how to do it. Right. It's something that you actually feel from within.
That's right.
Kind of like a hot flash. Starts in that core and just.
There you go. There you go.
A great metaphor.
that or a what do you call it? When you're in labor, a labor pain. It starts from the inside and it just,
radiates.
And you have to, women kind of know this better than men, I think, but you have to experience that when you feel it from the inside, growing or becoming something bigger. It's just, I just thought that was a funny way to relate.
Yeah. Well, and I think for men too, they know that experience, because when you get excited about something, it starts as just a little spark of excitement, but the more you get into the experience, whoa.
Yeah,
that's a good example. Yeah.
It expands, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And so since we're talking about, the different tools and ways people can heal from trauma, what do you suggest someone to do to heal trauma that maybe other people aren't talking about? Or
I would say that you really have to heal on the level of identity. So often everybody comes in at the level of environment, behavior, strategy, capabilities. And I really think we have to, I think it's much more important to make sure that you get all the way up to that level of identity and spirituality. Yeah. Because if you only go a part of the way up that sort of 6-level model, if you will, you're not going all the way. And I know that's what happened to me, right? I got dumped off at the level of belief.
Right, right.
My environment had been changed. I'd moved from New York to Florida. So I was like very clear. My environment was different. My capabilities and my strategies for living completely changed. My belief about, what my past meant had changed. So I was free in all that. And I got left at that level of like values, identity, spirituality. I had none of that. And I think it's really important. But the most important, I think, is the identity piece. I was on a business podcast this morning, and we were talking about fearless identities, because I really feel that unless we deliberately create identity, you cannot achieve anything that you want to achieve, whether that's recovery or business success.
Kind of like you're lacking direction. Yeah. If you haven't clearly identified your identity.
Well, and I would take it even a little further, if that's okay.
Yeah,
because I think a lot of people know how to set goals. So that makes them feel like they have a direction.
Right.
But I sort of liken it to, you have a race car. If you put, like a 1-cylinder engine in a race car, you're never going to win a race. Right. It's not possible. You need the right engine in the race car for it to go as fast as it can go. And I feel like identity is that engine. You can have all the goals and all the coaches and everything to map the vision, right? But if you don't have a fearless identity, if you don't know who you are, if you have not deliberately created who it is that you are living as, you can forget all of that other stuff. You will tap out at a certain level and you will encounter a wall of beliefs, a series of self-sabotaging behaviors, or whatever else it is. You will tap out simply because you have not decided who it is that you are in a fearlessness that allows you to be that as much as possible.
And so that's your goal, to help people to get to that level where they find that fearless identity?
Well, yes. And So I always start with the understanding that nobody comes in struggling with trauma ready to have a fearless identity, right? First, we have to start at the level of control. You have to learn how to control your state. You have to learn how to connect with your desire to change. You have to learn how to commit to your healing intention. You have to learn how to calibrate your resources and figure out what they are internally and externally.
Right.
So there's all that control level stuff that has to be done first.
And that's why you're there. That's why you're there, to help facilitate that.
Exactly. And that just leads you into the change level where you can soothe the wound, shed the story, shift the meaning so that and that's where we use all these great modalities that we have. And then you get up to the third level, which is create, which is.
How long have you been doing this, Michele?
15 years.
That's about the same time as me.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's too bad we didn't know each other back when we were getting started.
Well, we know each other now.
Yes, we do.
I'm calling you after we're off.
We'll need to meet up on the beach.
We do.
I'll drive north, you drive east.
We'll meet halfway.
I'd love to meet up more. That'd be great stuff. You've got great information, and I can tell how deep it goes within you, and you've got good, clear direction, with how you handle your clients. I just think you got great information. I'm so glad that we have you on here.
Thank you. And thank you both so much for what you're doing, because honestly, if anybody had educated me, I would have healed like 3 decades earlier.
I know.
So what they're doing is so important. So thank you for that.
I found my own way
you.
too. So, yeah.
So one last question I wanted to ask, because it does seem when you're dealing with trauma that, most of the time, or a lot of the times, it's because people are stuck in the past, And what advice would you have for people who are looking to leave the past in the past?
Oh, that's such a good question. What advice would I have? First of all, I would say stop trying to go back to who you were before. That might be the most important piece of advice.
That's not
because
me anymore.
Yeah.
Say that again.
It's just something that Dr. Will says when he's working. He says that
that's just not who I am
anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it's not who you're ever going to be again, but there's a follow-up to that, because I work with my clients in terms of through lines. This is not timeline technique through line. What I mean by through line is through line in identity. So identity it comes from your past to your present and goes into your future, even though it evolves. And to me, you can't go back to who you were before. That's a given. You don't like who you've become. Okay, we all understand why. And you have to choose who you want to be, but it doesn't mean you have to start from scratch. You can pick and choose all the stuff that you love about yourself as who you were before and bring it forward. Like I've been a writer since I was 7. So I always, immediately after my trauma, it's not like I thought this through, but at 13, I was like, I am still a writer. And I wrote really bad, dark suicide poetry in junior high. Just because like, that's where my head was.
Did you find that helped you? Do you think that was part of the, just the healing, or it was just an expression that was coming from your mind?
I think it was, was it? I'm not sure it was healing, because I didn't have any guidance of what to do with it.
Yeah.
It was very metaphorical. Like I knew what it was about, but it was a very metaphorical. So it wasn't like I want to kill myself. It was like a lot of metaphors. So I'm not sure that it was healing, but what it was me connecting to a part of myself that was in the past and bringing it forward. I was a writer. I am a writer still.
All right. So you brought forward the best parts of you that you wanted to keep.
Exactly. And that was very grounding for me. It's not like it healed me, but it gave me a way. Okay, my identity was fractured and fragmented. My perspective of the world was completely shattered. So I needed something that was familiar and that felt good to be me. And even writing bad, dark, highly metaphorical poetry, that did the trick. So I always recommend to people when you're healing two. So I'll give you two. Number one, stop trying to go back. Just pull forward the things that you're missing. Perfect. About yourself, because you can't pull your whole past forward. So I'm not suggesting that.
Or the things that you can learn. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can access something about yourself. The other thing that I was going to say is you have got to facilitate, foster, and find joy. And I don't care how long it's been since you've had that. I don't care how much you want to tell me it's not possible. I can't do it. BS. That's not true. Because at the depth of my despair, when I was 39 and really on the verge of just ending it for myself, because like 3 decades of PTSD, that was enough. And it was New Year's Eve, and you all are Floridians, so maybe you know of the Breakers Hotel, right? It's real big in Palm Beach. And my parents and my brother in there were there for New Year's Eve. And everybody, it's this huge party at this international hotel. Everybody's smiling, laughing, having this great time. And where am I? I'm in a gown in the stall of the ladies' room, bawling my eyes out because I can't imagine having to enter another year feeling as crazy and depressed and suicidal as I was that year that was ending. And, eventually people kick you out when you've been in a stall too long and it's a small bathroom for a big party. And so I had to go back to the party, wiped off my makeup, blotted my face, went back, grabbed my brother's hand and said, just dance with me. I don't want to have to talk to anybody. And we danced, and something transformative happened. All I can tell you is they were playing 80s cover music, and that's my decade. Up came this weird feeling. And in the interest of time, I won't tell the whole story, but it was in that moment that I reconnected to a sense of what I realized was joy. And I realized I'm not completely lost. This feeling, I thought I've been dead emotionally all this time. But if I can feel this tiny spark, there's something there. And I fanned that flame every day. I signed up for a dance class every day of the week. And I danced my way through the rest of my recovery. It's funny what a little bit of joy and then a lot of joy will do for your healing process in terms of neurotransmitters and all the rest. So those are my two. Stop trying to go back and instead start going forward and find something that's joyful. I have clients. I challenge every client to do this. Some garden. I've got a guy who has a wave runner, so he goes out in the ocean. Another goes fishing. Every client gets this challenge. Find something that, even if it's just 30 seconds of joy, that's all it takes to build a new neural pathway. Do it consistently, and you're going to strengthen and expand it.
That's great advice, Michele.
I find that really, really beneficial.
And I would like to challenge our listeners to find one thing that brings them joy and try to, what did you say, foster, facilitate, and find that thing that brings you joy and fan it, like you said, just a little bit every single day. I think that,
And the funny thing is, it will take on a life of its own, because even when you're depressed, it feels really good to feel good.
It does.
Even if it's just for 30 seconds.
And it actually feels better to feel good. When you can feel them both, then you can actually make a conscientious choice. This feels better. It feels warm. It feels loving and welcoming. It's,
That's right.
That's great. That's great stuff.
Don't tell anybody. But just by doing that, you have started to create your fearless identity. Just by doing that. One simple thing.
I won't tell anybody. Everybody listen to this.
Awesome. That's amazing. Yeah. I appreciate you so much. And I'm just so thankful for this conversation. And
likewise.
Yeah.
Likewise. But it's been a ton of fun. Big virtual hugs.
She's got
my beach from my coast to yours.
Oh, I love that.
She's got a couple of fun facts for you. And then we're going to bring up the information where people can get a hold of you or contact you or look you up or find your books.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
So yeah, this is something we do with all of our guests. That's called Fast Fun Facts. So we just ask you some quick questions so our listeners can get to know you on a different level. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Night owl. All the way.
Do you know your zodiac sign?
Aquarius.
Oh, awesome.
Wow.
I am the water bearer. You know, all the signs have a little like a 2-word phrase that describes them. And I'm sorry to say that the Aquarian 2 words is I know.
I don't know what mine is. I'm a Scorpio, but I don't know what the 2 words are.
Oh, you have to look for
We'll
your
look it
2
up.
words.
Yeah. So what is like the one song that can get you hyped up or excited no matter when and where you listen to it?
Oh, wow. All right. In English or Spanish? Because I'm a Latin dancer now.
Either way.
That little spark of joy led to Latin dancing.
I love that.
Do both.
Yeah, give us one of each.
Okay. All right. So Una Segundo by my favorite bachata band. So that would be one. You put that on or a Mark Anthony song, any Mark Anthony song. This is so cheesy, but here's what comes to mind, because this comes from, like childhood or teenagehood, I suppose. I Will Survive, because that song had so much meaning. It didn't mean the same as what Gloria Gaynor meant when she was saying it.
Right.
But to me, when I heard it as a teenager, I thought, holy crap. Yeah, I will survive.
I gotta keep singing this until I get to it. Yeah.
And it's just a good song. And when music comes up, I was working with a client the other day, and she was really struggling with this particular weekend coming up as a holiday weekend. She's hosting for family, and she was, talking about how I just have to put my head down and I just have to plow through and I'll just struggle with it all. And, we're trained to listen to language.
Right, those words.
And I said to her, well, what would happen if you picked your head up? Like, how different would the experience be? Oh no, then I'd see the finish line, and that's just overwhelming. And so we had this very interesting conversation about the difference between, having your head down or up, and how much environment plays into experience, and what was she doing to create an environment where she could have her head up and the finish line was comfortable. Yeah. And she's not auditory at all, and I'm highly auditory. And I was saying to her, what music or what sound can you bring into this? Because here I'm wanting to bring in a rep system that she's not using, right? Because she's very locked into her visual kinesthetics. And so I was saying, okay, let's bring in some auditory experience here.
Right.
And I was asking her, what music would you bring into this? And it's funny, the role that music can play when you need it to lift your spirit. It very often goes back to something that made you feel good when you were younger. And is still going to make you feel good today, because she also went back to the decade of her youth. And so I just think it's interesting for people to sort of walk away and think about what music really resonates with you, and how does it tie to who you used to be, and how can you use that?
How you can use it to spark you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Spark that joy. Yeah. So what is lighting you up and exciting you the most in life right now?
Oh, the idea of everybody creating a fearless identity, because just think about what the world could be, especially right now at the time that we're recording this. We're 2 years into or coming out of, depending on who you talk to, a pandemic that has really challenged everybody's identity, and how we all go forward from here individually, socially, culturally, and universally, globally, is really defined by how we all decide to show up. So what lights me up is conversations like this, where we get intentional about who we are, because I think, if we were all that way and feeling fearless in our
the world would be a different place. Yeah.
Wouldn't it? Would we need to put fear in somebody else if we felt fearless ourselves?
Right. Yeah. And that's another thing that I always like to just leave my clients with is, happiness is a choice. You can choose to be what you want to be. You can walk out your door and focus on everything that's negative, or you can walk out your door and focus on blessings and gratitude. But these tools that we're offering, if everybody just worked on themselves, started with themselves, and let go of everything outside of themselves and became who they were supposed to be, it would change the world, because the ripple, then into family, then into community, then into, and so the whole world would be different if we just work on ourselves and quit judging one another, right?
So true.
So true.
What a concept, right?
Yeah.
Not exactly brain surgery. It's crazy.
And if our listeners could walk away with one nugget of wisdom from today's conversation, what would you want that to be?
There's a reason you're here. You don't need to know what it is.
There you go. Just know that it is.
Yeah.
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 I love that.
Mhm.
And if people wanted to work with you or connect with you, how could they do?
You can find me and all my social icons and platforms at mytraumacoach.com.
Awesome. And your books and everything will be on there too?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the first book was a memoir. And the second book is all about identity. It's about trauma and identity and how to heal identity after trauma. And then the third book is literally for PTSD. It's healing thoughts for PTSD. And it actually came out of, I used to write a healing thought for my community every day. And people kept asking me to put it into a book form so they could carry it with them. And I didn't have time. I was just too busy serving in all the different ways that I was. And publishers started reaching out to me and asking me, we'll publish. What do you want to write? And so I published my identity book with Norton, and then Canary Press came and said, well, we'll publish. What do you want to write? And I said, well, funny you should ask, because I have all these healing thoughts and my community's been asking for them all in one place. And so we took that book, updated it and expanded it and turned it into it's an interesting way to start grounding yourself in the process of healing, whether or not you have PTSD. It's a useful book. It goes into the neuroscience of everything, but also the creation of a healing process. So that book and the others are all on the website with a description. So you can really pick and choose what's right for you where you are today.
That's so great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You're just wonderful. We're so glad to have you in the community and be a part of your community.
Right back at you.
And thank you for sharing your story.
Now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, me too. And thank you again just for sharing your story with us. I mean, you're truly an inspiration, and we're just so grateful to connect and just to have you here to be able to shine your light on the world. We just are so grateful, and thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's been an honor.
And likewise, because really we're just all shining our lights together, and then everything gets much more clear, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Mwah. Big hugs from
Thank you again.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Rise and Shine It's Hypno Time podcast. If you found some value in this episode and enjoyed it, please consider liking, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star review. Most people may not know that interacting with our content and our channel helps us to continue the work we're doing and reach more people. And we just want to thank you again from the bottom of our hearts for being such a loyal listener. And don't forget to tune in next week and every Tuesday for the latest episode of the Rise and Shine It's Hypno Time podcast with Deana and Suzanne. See you next week.